Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening, whether you're streaming it on Facebook Live or wherever you're watching us from. So a very, very warm welcome to the Muslim Council of Britain's Islam and Racial Justice Conference. Many of you will have heard of the Proudly Muslim and Black initiative, which was launched just last year. As part of this, we have organized a 2-day conference today as well as tomorrow. And I'm really proud to be part of the team of diverse Muslims that have worked really hard on bringing this to fruition in order to support change in our community. So I therefore warmly welcome you on behalf of the MCB, also on behalf of Henley Homes, who have generously sponsored this event, and also our following delivery partners, the Black Muslim Forum and Everyday Muslim, and finally, our supporting partners, which includes the Civil Service Muslim Network, the Trust Building Forum, the Salam Project, Peckham High Street Islamic and Cultural Centre, FOMWA UK, Council of Nigerian Muslim Organisations, Old Kent Road Mosque, and Barakah Cultural and Educational Association. Thank you to all of you for your support in bringing this event to everyone today. So we have an extremely jam-packed program for you all. And so I'm going to go straight into inviting Brother Lamine Conte to kick things off with an opening prayer.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وسلم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون صدق الله العظيم. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan for that beautiful opening prayer. So I am now very delighted to introduce Hassan Jawdi, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. He's going to formally welcome all of you to this event and explain a little bit more about why we're hosting it today.
Thank you, Hawa, for that. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody, and peace be upon you all. Thank you for joining us this Friday evening. I can't believe that it's been 18 months since the first Proudly Muslim and Black conference back in February 2019. And it's been just seems like yesterday. And of course, a lot has happened since then. And today, really looking forward to listening to the contributions today and of course at tomorrow's event as well, and you'll be hearing more very shortly. I've been asked just to speak to you for 5 minutes about the title of today's session, which is why Islam and racial justice, and why we should be discussing Islam and racial justice. So I'll be very brief, inshallah. I was actually recently reviewing the report of the Black Muslim Forum published earlier this year in April 2020. And when reading it, one sentence really stood out for me that I just wanted to share with everyone here. And it's this: it said, Islam, in the way that the Prophet, peace be upon him, preached it, has historically been inseparable from social justice. I'll say it again: Islam, in the way the Prophet preached it, has historically been inseparable from social justice. And this made me think, or remember actually, how many incidents in the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, really just exemplified his inseparable hunger for social justice. Number one, this is a man who came to pre-Islamic Arabian society where it was normal for people to bury their young daughters alive, infanticide. This was common practice of that society. Yet through his work, he brought about sweeping reforms to that society that suppressed that barbaric practice. In 2020 today, how many injustices do young girls and women still face in different sections of society today, including in our own Muslim communities here in Britain? Number two, this is a man, and it's often forgotten, who was a businessman, active in the trading caravans between Mecca and the surrounding regions like Yemen and Sham, etc. But there was much trade injustice practiced by many of the Meccan traders at the time, and abuse of their power and status. And the young prophet, even before the age of 40, when he became a prophet, played the key role in forming the Hulf al-Fudul, a trade alliance, often translated as the League of the Virtuous, which involved the chiefs of the tribes pledging to respect certain principles of justice in their trade dealings. So even before he became a prophet, Prophet Muhammad took a keen interest in ensuring that social justice was present in the society that he lived in. And of course, this is a man who, number three, in his final sermon, said those famous words that there is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or of a non-Arab over an Arab, and no superiority of a white person over a black person, or of a black person over a white person, except on the basis of personal piety and righteousness. Sadly, you don't need me to tell you that those lofty principles are clearly lacking in large parts of society today, including in our Muslim communities. So today we're at the beginning of the Islamic month of Rabi' al-Awwal, which of course is also the month of the birth anniversary of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he serves, I think, as an ever-present reminder that the efforts towards achieving racial justice in our communities is nothing but striving in his footsteps. And coming back to today and today's session, Islam and racial justice, I believe justice itself should always be at the core of the work of MCB and like-minded partners and organizations, if for no other reason than because it's in the MCB's mission statement, empowering Muslim communities towards achieving a just, a cohesive and a successful British society. But finally, we must not kid ourselves that as British Muslims, we have no credibility to lecture or to talk to anybody else about racial injustice in British society if within our own communities and our own institutions and our own organizations, we allow racial injustice to go unchallenged. Change must always start from within. And I'll end with the oft-repeated verse of the Holy Quran, chapter 13, Ar-Ra'd, verse 11, in the Sahih translation. Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of the people until they change what is in themselves. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to today's session, but also looking forward to how we can continue and strengthen this work and tackling this very important issue in our communities, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Hassan, for those really wonderful reminders and a reflection also on how far we've come to reach this point. So I can see lots of you are already engaging and sending messages. So that brings me nicely onto the housekeeping rules for today. So in this new virtual world that we're all inhabiting, it's really helpful for me to go over just some basics. So if you do wish to submit any questions for this session today, please do post those in the Q&A section on the Zoom. So there's a chat function, but there's also a separate Q&A section. We do encourage you to all be really, really interactive and make comments in the chat box. But do note that if you put questions in the chat box, they may not be picked up. So what I would say is please be interactive, comment, retweet, post on Facebook, go on social media, use Instagram, share your thoughts as you're listening to the speakers and as we go through this conference. There will be opportunities for questions throughout, as we are really determined for this to be actually interactive and for you to have an opportunity to have your say directly to the panelists. I'm going to run through the programme shortly and I'll specify when those opportunities for questions will be. And finally, you've already heard a bit from Hassan about why this conference is so important. And for many of us who have been involved in bringing this to you, we really do understand the sensitive nature of this topic. And it's something that's really close to the hearts of the Black Muslim community and the whole Muslim community, not just the Black Muslims. So we ask you to all please be respectful of each other and each other's views. And this is a safe space for us to learn and take action as a community. So if I can just quickly run us through the schedule, so we all know what we can expect from today. I did promise it was a jam-packed session. The first part of the conference is going to run until approximately 7, I think actually it's 7:40, I'd said 7:30, but around 7:40 p.m. UK time. I know we've got some international people dialing in internationally. We have approximately 5 talks on various topics being delivered by a number of speakers. As I mentioned, there's an opportunity for questions and answers. And after the 3rd topic, we're going to make our first break for questions and answers. And I will go through the Q&A section. And we'll also have an opportunity after the last speaker. So rather than you needing to keep in mind your questions from the first speaker all the way to the end, we are going to stop after the 3rd speaker and the 3rd topic so that you can ask some questions and then again at the end. We are going to do our very best to get through as many questions as we can, but it will assist if you specify which of our speakers your question is aimed at, where that's relevant. If it's just a question for the group or for all of the panel, that's absolutely fine. And then just to specify that for the last half an hour of today's session, we are going to have a soft launch of MCB's report on the Black Muslim experience in the UK. And if you haven't already heard about that, it's really, really exciting. So even I'm excited for that part. Okay, so that's enough from me. Without further ado, it's with great pleasure that I actually introduce our first speaker, who I'm a great fan of, and that is Brother Mustafa Briggs. Mustafa Briggs almost needs no introduction. As many of you will know, he is an academic and he is currently conducting further study at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, where he's studying Islamic studies and Arabic. He rose to international acclaim for his Beyond Bilal Black History and Islam lecture series, which saw him really look at the deep-rooted relationship between Islam and Black history. And he's delivered that at over 40 universities worldwide, including Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale. So all the creme de la creme. We're really blessed to have him with us here today. So inshallah, I'll hand over to you now, Mustafa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. All the way from Senegal. I'm calling in from Senegal, West Africa. But when I was asked to be a part of this conference and be a part of this discussion today, I could not refuse. And I managed to make some space in my schedule here to be able to be present with you all. The challenge, so the topic that I'm speaking about today is the challenges and integral role of Black Muslims in the history of the UK. And I feel like this is a very challenging and a very difficult topic to speak about, considering the notice and the time I was given. So instead of giving you a broad history, I'll give you a bit of a broad history, but then there's a particular part of the history of the presence of Black Muslims in the UK that I will focus on in the case study of a very famous individual and a very famous historical person whose presence here in the UK contributed a lot to British society in his time. And hopefully looking at that, we can find an example or a model of how our presence can benefit people today, inshallah. So if we look back as far as the reigns of the Tudor kings, we can see the presence of African Muslims. Many people feel that African Muslims are a recent addition to British society. But if we travel back in time, around 500, 600 years ago, we see that in Tudor England, for example, there was a large presence of Black Tudors who were known as Negroes at that time, or Black or Moors. And this is very interesting considering the fact that Moors were what British people used to describe Muslims from Africa, North African Muslims specifically, through the interaction that they used to have with people in Spain. As we know, Spain was under the control of the Umayyad Khilafah for 800 years, a branch of the Umayyad Khilafah for 800 years. And so many different North Africans were situated in Europe and had contact with Europeans through that. And most of them, if not all of them, were Muslims. So Gibraltar, for example, we know is named after the famous Umayyad general, Tariq. And it's Gibraltar comes from the word Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq, etc. And what's interesting is that the ethnic makeup of these people was clear in the way that the British people described them, because they described them as Black, and they described them as Black Moors. As Muslim North African society at that time, historically through their trade with West Africa, had a large presence of West Africans and people of West African ancestry in North Africa who had adapted and become part of that North African society and then spread over into Europe. And so we see that even in the royal courts of Henry VII and Henry VIII and Elizabeth I and James I, there was a large presence of Black people, most of whom were Muslim and most of whom had African origins. And then this continues all the way across the 15th and 16th centuries into the 17th century and the 18th century. But a particular case study that I want to focus on is the story of most people talk about him in his context of when he lived in America, but it was an Islamic scholar, a prince from a royal family whose name was Ayuba Suleiman Jallo. So Ayuba Suleiman Jallo came from a Fulbe family, and his grandfather had established a town called Bundu, and he was essentially the prince of Bundu. And so he had traveled to Gambia on a trading mission. Some people say he was trading slaves himself and paper. How historically accurate that is. Anyway, he had traveled. So he was an Islamic scholar. He had mastered the Sharia. He had studied the Quran and memorized it. He was fluent in Arabic as well as in Fulfulde, his native language. And he was a very noble person from a noble family. And he was captured and sold into slavery in Gambia and transported to America. But when it was discovered that he was a scholar, when it was discovered that he had education, when it was discovered that he was highly literate and he had a mastery of the Arabic language, they immediately associated him with the historic link that they had with North Africa. And he was purchased by the head of the British West Africa Company, who was the British company that was in charge of all the trade and the slave trade essentially happening in West Africa, for £45 and brought to England. And when he arrived in England, he was integrated into high society. And so when he was hosted in England, he arrived in England in 1733. So as far back as 1733, he was hired to sort out the Arabic language scripts and sort through them on behalf of Oxford University and the British Library. Oxford University were the ones that translated his letters that he wrote to his father. But he was hired by the British Library to sort through the documents in the British Library and help them arrange their Arabic collection And it was whilst he was in England that he had a picture painted of him called The Fortunate Slave. So we can see, for example, all of these people had a presence historically in Britain. All of these people had a presence historically in the UK. 15 minutes that they've given me is not enough for me to talk about everything that I want to talk about in terms of this subject. But essentially, I want to summarize and say that the presence of African Muslims is historical in the UK. The contribution of African Muslims to society is also historical in the UK. So if we see ourselves in this day and age as Black Muslims in the UK, we have to look at where we fit into society and what society can benefit from us, as well as what we can benefit from society. And I feel like that's the most important point. People don't look at Africa, unfortunately, and people don't look at the Islamic world as a place. Hello?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it disappeared. Sorry. Unfortunately, people don't look at West Africa, or people don't look at the Islamic world as places that have knowledge or have culture or have things to contribute to society. But people like, for example, you have Rudolph Ware here, who will come and speak after me, Professor Rudolph Ware, can show you and display that the rich legacy of knowledge, the rich legacy of culture, the rich legacy of education that we have is something that people can learn from, and something that can heal a lot of the negative things that we see in society today. So when we talk about being present in the UK and assimilating into society, the assimilation shouldn't be to the detriment of our own culture and our own history and our own heritage. As being proudly who we are and understanding our history and understanding what we can contribute to society will help the society through our presence, and they can benefit from us as well as us benefiting from them. And then specifically within the context of the Muslim community, I feel it's important to mention, and I'll end my talk here as it seems that my 15 minutes is finished. Events like this are essential, as it's important for us to gather the different intellects that we have, gather the different people that we have together to figure out how we can help each other to progress and how we can help each other to do things. But we should make sure that our contributions and our participations and the events that we're organizing are not performative. It doesn't make sense for us to only speak about issues that affect Black Muslims or Black people in Black History Month. This should be an ongoing conversation that we should have all throughout the year. We shouldn't wait until October and then rush to scramble together a few people to give a talk about Black history and then not speak to them or not make any progress on what we spoke about until the following year. It doesn't make sense. So I feel as though the organizations involved in organizing this, I saw, Salam Project, I saw the Muslim Family Project, I saw many different organizations highlighted, are all people whose work is ongoing. So all of us here present today, we should look at those organizations and how we can support them and how we can help them and how we can be a part of what they are doing in order to make the society beneficial for everybody. Because we know that the Prophet ﷺ, that was what his example was. And Allah tells us in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have in the Prophet ﷺ a perfect example. Hilful Fudul wasn't just in 1 month of the year, it was throughout the year, as our brother who opened the talk mentioned earlier. The Prophet ﷺ was continuously fighting for justice, continuously fighting for equality, continuously fighting to educate people and raise people up. And I feel like if we're going to take away anything, we should realize that that is what we should be doing ourselves. So thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be a part of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to many more conversations similar to this in the future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Brother Mustafa, that was absolutely fantastic, mashallah. And there was so much there for us to think about. And particularly, I think it really resonated with all of us, what you've said about the absolute importance of this being an ongoing conversation, but not just a conversation, action that needs to be taken throughout the year to support the brilliant work that you and others are doing. So inshallah, we hope that this is not even a start because it's already been started, but this is a continuation of that, and that actually outside of this month, we'll see the same engagement from others. Jazakallah khairan. So now I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, who is Sister Zara Awale. Zara is in fact a full-time mother of 4 children, mashallah, and she works as a part-time healthcare chaplain and is also a founding member of the grassroots group BLM Redbridge. She blogs on anti-racism, gender equality, and also health equalities amongst the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. She's also currently, as if she doesn't have enough on her plate, she's also currently reading a master's in public health at City University of London as an Aziz Foundation scholar. Sister Zara, if I can invite you to speak.
Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. I'm going to just put my notes up on my screen. So I'll start with dua. Alhamdulillah wa salatu salam ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you all. Peace be with you. I'd like to thank the organisers of this event, and I pray some real, tangible, structural change is the outcome of today's talks and discussions and the following report, inshallah. My talk today is on the impact of coloniality as a tool of disbelief in light of the Quranic message that racism is the original sin, and the challenge to tackle anti-Black racism, i.e. anti-Blackness in the Muslim community. So let's set the picture. As I recite from Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 30 to 34, where it says, Prophet, when your Lord told the angels, I'm putting a successor on earth, they said, how can you put someone there who will cause damage and bloodshed? And we celebrate your praise and proclaim your holiness. But he said, I know things you do not know. He taught Adam all the names of things. Then he showed them to the angels and said, tell me the names of these if you truly think you can. They said, may you be glorified. We have knowledge only of what you have taught us. You are the all-knowing and all-wise. Then he said, Adam, tell them the names of these things. When he told them their names, God said, did I not tell you that I know what is hidden in the heavens and the earth, and that I know what you reveal and what you conceal? When we told the angels, bow down before Adam, they all bowed, but not Iblis. He refused and was arrogant. He was of the disobedient. So right from the start of creation, the story begins with God entrusting the creation to us as Khalifa, to humanity, men and women, even though the angels can sense the potential harm humans will do, having seen what the jinn have done. But God sets them straight. I know things you do not. Iblis, on the other hand, not only refused to bow down to Adam as God commanded, in addition, he threatens to destroy Adam and his descendants, and has the arrogance to say that he's better, and consequently knows better, when only God knows best the secrets of everything. Let's hear what happens next in Surah Al-Hijr, verses 32 to 42. God said, Iblis, why did you not bow down like the others? And he answered, I will not bow to a mortal you created from dried clay, formed from dark mud. Get out of here, said God. You are an outcast, rejected until the day of judgment. Iblis said, my Lord, give me a respite until the day when they are raised from the dead. You have respite, said God, until the day of the appointed time. Iblis then said to God, because you have put me in the wrong, I will lure humankind on earth and put them in the wrong, all except your devoted servants. God said, devotion is a straight path to me. You will have no power over my servants, only over the ones who go astray and follow you. So God bestowed an armory of faculties in addition to spirit as defenses to guide humanity: faith, conscience, intellect, instinct, and fitra. All this to attain mastery over our nafs, our ego, and Iblis, who isn't going down without a fight, as we see in Surah Al-A'raf, verses 16 to 17. And then Iblis said, because you have put me in the wrong, I will lie in wait for them, all on your straight path. I will come at them from their front and their back, from their right and their left, and you'll find that most of them are ungrateful. Iblis's arrogance and pride lead to his downfall, and so he is on a mission to take as many of us with him as he can. His arrogance could be termed as the original sin, and racism falls into that arrogance of supremacy that is integral to white supremacist society and within our own Muslim communities today in the form of anti-Blackness. The scholar activist Dr. Suad Abdul-Khabir, in her excellent book, Muslim Cool, Race, Religion and Hip Hop in the United States, says, while they participate in the work of anti-Blackness as non-whites, Arab and South Asian US American Muslims have a complex relationship to Blackness and whiteness. As Sylvia Chan Malik has discussed, for Arab and South Asian US American Muslims, who are neither white nor Black, it is ethnic particularism rather than assimilationism that enables a limited privilege in relation to whiteness and Blackness. Cultural distinctions such as dress, food, and religion are often retained, along with a deep commitment to the bootstrap ethos of free market capitalism in alignment with neoliberal multiculturalism. This practice of modern minority performativity extends the distance between the immigrant and a Black cultural distinctiveness, in which Black music stands in for Black lack, excess, and Blackness is disavowed as un-Islamic. At the same time, Black cultural distinctiveness can be instrumentalized as a useful tool in the reproduction of an ethnically particular Muslim identity. For example, Black music and culture, particularly hip hop, is demonized as un-Islamic, whilst at the same time it is instrumentalized to draw in youth at Islamic gatherings and entertain the crowds. Arab and South Asian US American Muslims have much in common with their counterparts in the UK and Europe in how they conveniently use Black culture and identity whilst also distancing themselves from it. She continues, thus the maintenance of non-Black cultural distinctiveness can work within the racial hierarchies of the United States, although they do not have the same privileges as white Americans when they adhere to the facts of Blackness. These non-white and non-Black Muslims reproduce the logic of white supremacy. So by playing the good immigrant in the same way, Arabs and South Asian Muslims in the UK can also reproduce the logic of white supremacy. This is tantamount to kufr, i.e. disbelief, as it is anti-Black racism, and racism is the original sin, as we saw earlier in the Quran. God urges us to do and be better. Be a community that calls what is good, urges what is right, and forbids what is wrong. Those who do this are the successful ones. So rather than defining radical as extreme change and something to fear, especially by those who seek to gain the most from it, I prefer Angela Davis's definition that it simply means grasping things by their root. So as God tells us, calling for good and standing against wrong is what radical love looks like and what a radical anti-racist Muslim acts like. And the ultimate example of that is in the beloved Prophet himself, alayhi salam. Proximity to whiteness, practicing whiteness and upholding its unjust structures and seeking approval from white supremacy will do people of color no good in the long run, because no matter how much of a good immigrant we are, we'll always be other to white supremacy. We can work within the structures of white supremacy for equality and better conditions, but this is just what the Black Panthers would call survival pending revolution. Revolution as in radical structural change. We will succeed being muflihun if we are true to God and stand up for what is right and forbid what is wrong. That's a God-given promise. The beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ explained radical love to us in a hadith found in Muslim, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. I heard the Messenger of Allah ﷺ say, whosoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand, and if he is not able to do so, then let him change it with his tongue. And if he is not able to do so, then with his heart, and that is the weakest of faith. Muslim well-known organizations such as MCB and many Muslim charities need to take a radical look at themselves and decide which side they are on the side of God or Iblis. Because when you study their structures, they are overwhelmingly dominated by staff and senior management who are white, Arab, South Asian Muslim. And it's become a sort of an old boys network where one can move easily between each and find leadership roles because of who they know rather than competency. According to an NBC census from 2015, Black Muslims make up approximately 10% of Muslims in the UK, but this is a crude figure, since many Black Africans, such as Somalis, do not identify as Black British or Black African, but rather as Somali or possibly other. So in conclusion, do Muslim organizations look like the communities they represent? If not, why? It's plain to see that the lack of Black Muslims in these organizations is due to anti-Blackness and a culture of racism and proximity to whiteness. You don't have to be white to practice white supremacy. You just follow the rules, i.e. distance yourselves from Blackness, thereby scapegoating them. These organizations should be minimum 10 to 20% employing Black Muslims, men and women, in my view. The fact that we're still talking about this today is tiring for Black Muslims. When George Floyd was lynched in daylight by a white police officer, and when the ensuing uprising happened, which highlighted the BLM movement that had been there for years, some South Asian Muslims were heard saying, well, all lives matter, or brown lives matter too, or what have Black people suffered compared to the Palestinians? BLM is about the fact that Black folks are more likely to be killed in police custody and sent to jail, to be stopped and searched, to be unemployed, to live in substandard housing, etc., etc. We know that. So those who say this, please desist. Do better, stand up against racism wherever it is, and support your Black Muslim brothers and sisters. Make space for them in Muslim spaces and welcome them in, not just tolerate them. Change the empire state of mind, that white supremacy logic mentioned earlier, and rise up to the challenge of defeating Iblis and structural racism. I would like to make a few suggestions, and we can talk about more ideas in the Q&A. So I would say that MCB as an umbrella organization does an audit on their member organizations, i.e. mosques, madrasas, and campaigns for more Black staff to be employed via positive action and to urge for inclusion on committees from the following: women, disabled, youth, Black and other underrepresented Muslims who have real decision-making powers. Number two, Muslim charities need to make recruitment more transparent, have more inclusive recruitment panels, and actively seek to employ more Black Muslim staff via positive action and other programs. And my last suggestion is all Muslim charitable organizations should have a race equality strategy that the senior management lead on, and a race equality standard with clear indicators and performance targets to be met annually with financial consequences if not met, and a rigorous anti-racist policy, an EDI lead, equality, diversity, inclusion lead, and committee or working group to implement this. Thank you for listening.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Zara. That was really, really powerful. And I was really, really looking forward to your talk because so much of what you just discussed has been so topical in our community. And the fact that not only did you give us some facts, you gave us your opinions, but you also gave us your suggestions about change in action. Mashallah, it's already the theme that is developing from today's session. You know, it's really about action. What can we do differently? So Jazakallah khairan, and really, really beautifully said. If you check the chat, many people are agreeing. So now I'm really, really pleased to introduce our next topic. Our next topic is actually being delivered, mashallah, by two speakers. We have Dr. Bilal Ware from USA and Sheikh Abdulrahman Ahmed from Nigeria. So Professor Ware, we are really, really humbled to have you here. Professor Ware is a historian of Africa and Islam. He's also the founder and director of the Initiative for the Study of Race, Religion and Revolution. He's the author of multiple books and also multiple articles on the history of slavery and abolition in Islamic Africa and the Atlantic world. His most recent book, Jihad of the Pen, explores Muslim mysticism in West Africa. And with regards to Sheikh Abdulrahman Ahmed, he is a national missioner of the Ansaruddin Society of Nigeria. That is a 96-year-old Islamic organization established for the purpose of educational, moral, and social development for Muslims. The organization boasts millions of members with its achievements spanning Nigeria's faiths and ethnicities. So without further ado, I'll firstly hand over to you, Dr. Bilal Ware, and I hope the time difference is working for you.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, the timing is just fine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala barakatuhu. It's an honor, privilege, and a pleasure to be with you virtually to discuss this absolutely central topic. So I'm going to begin today's discourse, Quranic injunction against racism and white supremacy, with where our sister Zahra left off, which is with the creation of our shared ancestor, Adam. Adam, it is worth recalling, in classical Arabic, in Quranic Arabic, is actually the only skin color reference that occurs to any of the, that is attached to any of the protagonists, any of the people in the Quran, because the name Adam in ancient Arabic actually means dark brown or black in color. This is the only reference to skin color attached to an individual that you will find in the Quran. And it is a different way of framing the problem that Sister Zahra noted for us, which is that seeing racism as a sort of original sin. It's not simply that racism is an original sin in that it's the cause of Iblis's fall, but it's actually anti-Blackness. It's actually anti-Black racism because that refusal to bow to our jet black ancestor, our shared common ancestor as Bani Adam, is the beginning of a satanic attack against humanity. So let's go into that moment. In Surah Al-Sad, when God says, Iblis, why did you not bow to that which I made with my own two hands? And Iblis's response is to say that I am better than him. You made me from fire, you made him from clay. Thus, on the basis of his origin and his bodily composition, Iblis claims superiority over our entire species. He is the first racist in the historical chronology presented by the Quran. My brother Mustafa Briggs, who got us started, mentioned that I teach about African history. Most of my discourse today is going to be rooted in Quran, but I will mention something taught by the great West African Islamic scholar Sheikh Ahmed Bamba Mbake of Senegal, born 1855, deceased 1927. Sheikh Ahmed Bamba classified the sin of racism alongside or as part of the broader Quranic sin of kibr or istikbar, arrogance or pride. And he said, never forget that it was this that brought low the cursed Iblis. We seek refuge in God from both of them. In other words, from Iblis and from pride. This is in one of his foundational texts, Masalikul Janan, The Pathways of Paradise, which is translated in part in my most recent book, co-authored with two of my former students, Jihad of the Pen. And in Masalikul Janan, Bamba continues. He says, never forget that it was this that brought low the cursed Iblis. We seek refuge in God from both of them. He said, the cure is to contemplate your body and how it was created. You begin your life as a nasty drop of sperm. You live your life as a walking sack of feces, and you end your life as a corpse, odious and rotting. You are all the children of Adam, and it is from dirt that you were created. Dirt. In the Wolof language, you can say, Amulugana sufe suf. There ain't nothing lower than dirt. Nothing is closer to baseness than dirt itself. Our origins could not possibly be more humble. It is only God's ennobling breath and his careful caress that elevates the station of the children of Adam. Because note, God does not create Adam the same way that he creates everything else in the Quran. Everything else in the Quran is created. When God wants to decree a matter, he has only to say unto a thing, be, and it is. But that is not how he made Adam, because as we just referenced in Surah Al-Sad, God said, Iblis, why did you not bow to that which I made with my own two hands? Adam, that original ancestor, that original Black ancestor is made out of the dirt of the earth with God's own two hands. And God breathes of his own uncreated breath into the frame of that Black ancestor in order to bring us into being. Everything else created with an exteriorizing act, speech, separates the speaker from that which is spoken. A caress makes Adam, the original man, in his fitra, as he was created by the Fatir as-samawati wal ard, as he was created by the originator, the original man was black and tall and beautiful. And he contained within him the essence of Eve, Hawa, black and beautiful. And the devil has been jealous ever since he saw the frame of that beautiful black body propped outside the gates of the garden. Before God even breathed the breath in, he attacked our ancestor. Before he was even made caliph, he threw stones, Iblis threw stones at Adam's empty, hollow form. And the Quran tells us in Surah Rahman that mankind is made out of a kind of sounding clay. And sure enough, when Iblis cast pebbles at the frame of Adam, suspecting that the thing might be hollow, they made a clanking sound. So he swam in through the mouth of our blessed ancestor, swam around the insides and flew out the back and said, this thing is empty. It's going to spend all its days trying to fill the emptiness inside it. If it's ever given dominion over me, that's how I'm going to break it. White supremacy, that original sin of the shaitan, that original satanic religion, because racism is Iblis's religion. He prefers it over worship of God. That means that is his religion. And that is the religion that he has been trying to teach us since that day. He has been trying to convince us to see one another with the same contempt that he has for us as a species, but especially to see the black amongst us as contemptible. Which is why we have iterations of colorism in virtually every single human society. But it's not simply that white supremacy, not simply that racism, not simply that colorism, but the way that it intersects with that other thing that Iblis used to target us, which is the emptiness inside us. Capitalism, global capitalism feeds on the insatiable desire of human beings to consume more. That desire for human beings to consume ever more is the thing that led to the commoditization of my ancestors in the creation of global systems of capital and enslavement that reduced human beings, Black human beings, to commodities, and which have now commoditized, given cash value to every single human life on the face of this earth. We are living, and you in Britain are living in the shadow of the enslavement of my ancestors. Your financial institutions, Lloyd's of London, is started by ensuring slave voyages. The first corporation to exist in England is the British East India Company and West India Company. Modern corporations as we know them are created through the operationalization of this satanic ideology. It is our responsibility, not just as Black people, but as believing people, to struggle against Shaitan, because God tells us that he is our manifest enemy. He is hiding in plain sight. His religion is the basis of modernity itself. Because there is nowhere that you can go in this world today where white supremacy and capitalist commodification rule through ethnic differentiation is not part of the basic substance of all economic and political systems. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, if you see an injustice, stop it with your hand. And if you are unable to do so, then speak against it with your tongue. And if you are unable to speak against it with your tongue, then at least turn your heart against it, for that is the least that can be accepted of a believer. The truth of the matter is that so many of us are attached to Occidental ideologies, to comfortable middle-class Western lifestyles, or the aspiration to achieve such, that we dare not raise our hand. We dare not raise our voice. we don't even turn our hearts against it. We buy in. And as our brother Hassan said when he opened us, that making an effort as a Muslim community to intervene in the broader problem of racial injustice when you have not settled the matter of racial injustice within your own community, and especially of anti-Black racism within your own community. It's like a Senegalese saying, it's like a man with no pants on, walking around telling everybody to pull up their pants. The emperor has no clothes. We are supposed to be an exemplary moral community, and yet we treat African people, we treat Black people as a forgotten addendum to be addressed during Black History Month. We teach that Bilal was the only Black companion of the Prophet, when Ali, may Allah be well pleased with him and ennoble his face, is described as Adam Shadidul Udma in color. The same terminology used to describe our Black ancestor Adam. Moses, the most frequently mentioned name in the Quran, Musa, mentioned at least 135 times. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said Moses was the most handsome of the Black men. He was Asham Adam in color. He was intensely Black in color, and his hair was jahd. Incorporating Black people into the telling of this story is not an act of charity. We have been there from the beginning of the story of Islam with the creation of Adam, through the most frequently mentioned proper name in the Quran, Musa, to the closest relative, most beloved founder of Ahlul Bayt, Ali, the cousin of the Messenger of God, alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. So if we are unable to uproot this sin of white supremacy, this sin of racism, this sin of colorism from our own community, then shame on us. God is going to count us amongst the oppressors. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan. That was unbelievably powerful. And everything, that reminder was so timely about us really needing to know our history. So many of the chats that have come through and the questions that have been posted. I think someone's just said they're really close to tears. It was very to deal with questions and put them to the panel. This is your opportunity to ask questions. Okay, just checking everyone can still see me. This is your opportunity to please ask questions. Feel free to post them in the Q&A section. So if I can now please invite Sheikh Abdulrahman Ahmed, please do join us. Sorry, Sheikh, do we have you there?
Yeah, I'm there. The video is off.
Alhamdulillah.
Now.
We can't see you on the camera, but we can hear
now
you.
The video, you have to enable the video. The video is off. Okay, that's right now. Okay.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa bihi nasta'in. Sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'da, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It's my pleasure to be part of this very, very, very exciting program. And what more do I have to say other than to remind us of what the Quran has, admonished of. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened in the Quran with a very powerful message, it said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم صدق الله العظيم. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala said, have I not covenanted with you, O you children of Adam, Allah ta'budu shaitan, that you will not worship the devil, because the devil is an avowed enemy. وَأَنْ يَعْبُدُونِي, that you will worship me alone. هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ, that is the only straight path. This warning is core and is central to the topic that we're looking at today. The Quran is there, it is explicit, there is no doubt about it, it's so clear. The Quranic stance about racism and racial discrimination, supremacist ideas is so clear. It's an eternal message. It has been explained to us. Yet there is a particular pull, there is a particular push. It is attractive for as long as it benefits our particular interests. Let us look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran when he was referring to this. He said, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, have created you from a pair of a man and a woman. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, and I've made you into nations and tribes so that you would know one another, so that you will recognize one another. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ, the best and the most honored among you, the most honorable among you, the most valued person among you is the one that is the most pious. This cannot be clearer. So for us, like the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّكُمْ مِنْ آدَمَ, all of you, whether you're white, whether you're brown, whether you're black, whether you are colored, all of you are from Adam. وَآدَمَ مِنْ تُرَابٍ, and Adam is from the dust. The central message of the Quran and Islam itself is Tawheed, unity, including the unity of mankind. Mankind is one nation. كَانَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Mankind is one nation, one community. The distinction of color, the distinction of race is the grace of Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran that إِنَّ فِي اخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ لَآيَةً. The fact that you speak different languages, the fact that you have different skin pigments, la'aya, is a sign of Allah, a sign of the creative power of Allah, a sign of the creative force of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, a sign of diversity, a sign of the greatness of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, a sign of the manifestation of the creativity of the master creator in the creation. This is not basis for discrimination. It is not a basis for a part, subjecting the others to ridicule, to odium. That is why in Surah Al-Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala particularly warned. He said, لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكون خيرا منهن. Let no people make fun of the others. Let those who are white not make fun of those who are colored or who are black or who are brown. Maybe they're better than them. Maybe they're better than them. And the Quran is very, very affirmative of the basis of categorization. My admonition, brothers and sisters, is that we do not need to reinvent the wheel, but we should look at the implementation, angle of this. I quite agree that even among us, races and tribes, in our masajid, races and tribes, in our communities, races and tribes, even the unique opportunity of bringing everyone together during Hajj and reducing everyone to the same level, you still have elements of some kind of racial discrimination. This is what we must look at. This is what we must operationalize. And I quite agree that we must look inward. We must come here each time to look at our achievement. We must be able to assess, our performance in terms of, reducing, the racial gap, the racial friction. We must stop, the African mosque, the Nigerian mosque, the Algerian mosque, the Senegalese mosque, and so on and so forth. We must regard people for what they can offer, not the skin, the color of their skin, not their diction, not their accent, but at the end of the day, ultimately, humanity is one and the same. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially in his farewell speech, had demonstrated this very, very clearly. In terms of racial equality, and this has been exemplified by the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, if an Abyssinian slave is appointed as leader over you, alaykum bisam'i wa ta'a. It is up to you to hear and to obey. And by the way the Prophet ﷺ treated Bilal al-Habasha in preference to even Arabs, Quraysh, tells us that we do not need anything to add. We do not need to subtract anything. All we need to do is work out an implementation roadmap. And the Muslim Council of Britain is in a very good position to do this for the Ummah. We can learn. The Muslim Council of Britain has a modicum of diversity that it can operationalize, and it can teach the Muslim world how to really live on the basis of the Quranic maxim of equality. Brothers and sisters in Allah's deen, there is no doubt about the fact that the world we live in is experiencing turmoil right now, racially, economically, politically, and this is the time. This is the time to present Islam in a manner that will not only be intelligible to others, but that will recommend itself as an alternative and a viable alternative. I pray that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala will make the attainment of excellence in all good things easy for us. I pray that Allah will accept our efforts in this direction, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us a tawfiq. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Jazakallah khairan, Imam. I can see that your talk inspired a lot of thoughts in our attendees, and if you check the chat, a lot of people are making comments about what we can do and what we can do differently. So I mean to your du'as. We're going to turn now to the Q&A. So I should have all the panelists still on the line. If possible, if you can, don't mind putting your cameras on. And I will just go through some of the questions. I know Brother Mustafa is also here, but he's on the move, I think, in Senegal, so he might not be able to do his camera. So we have quite a few questions. One of them, firstly, says, what is really needed from the Muslim community? So it's a question, what is really needed from the Muslim community to be more equitable to all the community in its diversity? That's a big question. It's not directed at anyone in particular. Do any of our panelists want to answer that? Dr. Ware?
So I would just redirect the question slightly in the following way. I think that it frequently is the case when we have conversations about censoring anti-Blackness and putting Black people back into the story. It very quickly dissolves into a welter of discussions about how we make it diverse and equitable for everyone, rather than actually focusing on the problem of anti-Blackness. Because the diversity is an excellent aim, but the centrality of anti-Blackness to our modern racial experience is actually at the core of every kind of ethnic chauvinism, right? The way that I put it is this, is that the story of the oppression of Bene Israel in the Quran, the 426 solar years that they spend in bondage, is an exemplary tale about the oppression that defined an age. There were lots of people that were being oppressed on the face of the earth during the time of Bene Israel's bondage in Egypt, but God doesn't tell you all those stories. He tells you the story of the oppression of Bene Israel in Egypt because it defined an age. It was a foundational form of oppression that endured for 4 centuries. The struggle of Black people to achieve liberation in a world that is literally founded on our commoditization and enslavement is the foundational struggle of the age. And that is why people responded to George Floyd's murder with protests all throughout the world, because they sensed in some way that if Black people at the heart of the belly of the beast can get free, then everybody will get free. And so this move where we make it a conversation about having everybody's ethnic diversity acknowledged and struggle to validate can be a salutary move when it is done for the right reasons, but frankly, for the most part, it is usually used as a diversion to move the conversation away from centering on Black people and Black people's historic struggle. And the point of that is that, listen, as a Muslim, whether you're Black like me or like the Imam or Sister Zahra, or you're Somali and you don't even consider yourself Black, which is crazy, but we can have that conversation. It happens, but it's crazy. We can have that conversation another time. The point is that there is no way of being on the right side with your Lord if you are on the wrong side with Black people. You are going to be washed away with the flood that takes Pharaoh. Period. Full stop. And don't think that your La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah is guaranteed protection against that, because God always answers the prayer of the oppressed against their oppressors. So if you are part of the oppression of our people, which is everyone that is not actively striving against our oppression, because the whole world is built upon our oppression and to sustain our oppression. So if you are not actively resisting it, then you are tacitly complicit with it. Look, prepare to be counted amongst the people of Pharaoh unless you stand with my people now. It ain't about diversity. It's about protecting and affirming Black life, Black dignity, Black humanity.
Jazakallah khairan. And I think that also does answer another question where a sister was saying, Dr. Ware, that she really liked your talk, but where do we begin? And so I hope you were paying attention, because that's really, really the answer. There's also a question, and this is more targeted at Sister Zahra. Having more Black faces in Muslim organizations doesn't solve the problem. The person asking says they work for a large Muslim charity, felt completely excluded amongst their largely South Asian colleagues, left after 3 months. As Black Muslims, how do we navigate hostile environments without getting angry and wanting to separate? I know you've given a bit of an answer on the chat, but if you don't mind answering live, Sister Zahra, and especially that last bit about saying without getting angry and wanting to separate, I keep telling my non-Black Muslim friends and colleagues that I actually think we're at a racial crisis in the Ummah, because I think a lot of Black Muslims feel that way when they have that experience. We no longer want to sort of join or collaborate. So do you have an answer for that?
I think yeah, I mean, I appreciate the fact that she shared that, because that's quite a, that's quite a courageous step. to do in the first place. So I really felt that question. I think it's something that the organization needs to work on. The structure is the problem, and she is not the problem. The problem is the structure, and it's going back to structural change. She alone is not going to fix the problem. A lot of the time, Black people are, the diversity lead in the organization. They're the one who's, given the remit to take care of this, this problem of diversity, of equality in the organization. It's not our problem. We didn't create this problem, okay? White people, who are generally the senior people, they're the ones who can make the change. They're the ones who need to change the minds of each other. Whether they're white, they're South Asian, they're Arab, in these organizations, they need to do the work. We don't need to do the work. We can do our bit, but we don't need to lead on this because it's not our problem in the first place. So I think that's number one. Number two, going back to how you run your organization, you should have more Black people there in the first place. She shouldn't be the only person there. Where is their policy? Where is their positive discrimination, positive action policy? Where is their, racial equality strategy? Where's the anti-racist policy? Everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, Black Lives Matter, and put a fist, on their social media platform. But where's the actual change, the structural change? Very little has changed since George Floyd died. I'm sad to say, and nothing's gonna change until the structures change. That's it.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I think we probably have time for one more question. And there's quite a few on here. So let me just have a look. Okay, so someone is asking, can this generation put an end to seeing others as just ourselves and not less than us? So I think seeing others as being equal to ourselves rather than less than ourselves, can this generation put an end to that? Does anyone want to answer that? I can either come to you, Imam, or maybe I can go to, is Brother Mustafa still on the line? I know he was on the move. Imam Abdulrahman, do you want to answer that? Whether or not you think this generation can put an end to seeing others in a similar way to ourselves rather than less than ourselves?
Well, I believe nothing is actually impossible. It could be pretty challenging. Maybe the upcoming generation can be brought up with that kind of confidence, because except for a few people, and I'm sure they are very few and far between, there is that inferiority complex. We are quick to assert our inferior position. And that is why we are where we are today. That is the reason why most of the things that are happening to us are happening. Interestingly, and very sadly too, most of the people who perpetrated these atrocities and who are keeping it alive are part of us. They are the ones that are being used. They are the faces of oppression. They are the faces of discrimination.
I have 5 minutes. I have 5
Brother
minutes.
Lamine, can you go on mute? Brother Lamine?
Yes.
Sorry, you're not on mute. Thank you. Sorry, Sheikh.
And they are really the faces.
Oh no, I'm not sure if someone muted. Sheikh, yeah, you're back. Sorry about that.
That's right.
Jazakallah khairan. Did you want to finish? I'm so sorry for the interruption. I'm not sure if it's just on my end, but I think Sheikh might have frozen now.
He looks frozen from here.
Oh,
Now he's back.
He is.
okay. All right. No problem. Jazakallah khairan. So I think actually that's a good point to stop, as we've got a couple more speakers, and I just wanted to mention just a couple of the other comments. I noticed in the comments people are talking about different ways we can promote our community. People were thanking all the speakers for the powerful reminders and talking about what the best way forward will be. If we can, we'll come back to some of the questions that we didn't get to. But I would encourage the speakers to have a look at the Q&A and also the chat. And if you do want to answer any just typing answers, please do go ahead. So once again, Jazakallah khairan. We really, really do appreciate the talks that we've received so far from Brother Mustafa Briggs, from Sister Zara Awale, from Professor Ware, and from Sheikh Abdulrahman Ahmed. So moving on to the next topic. For our next very important topic, I'm really, really delighted to introduce our speakers, Javaria Masood and Tawfiq Akinpeju. Javaria is someone who is extremely active in the Muslim community, a regular at Rumi's Cave, where she's been involved in organising events, and she's also an advocate on matters pertaining to structural racism and inequality. Tawfiq Akinpeju is the youth emir for MAN UK, also known as Old Kent Road Mosque. And as many of you will know, Old Kent Road Mosque offers a wide variety of services, ranging from the provision of adequate prayer facilities for both men and women, Arabic and Islamic studies courses, advice sessions on legal, housing and health matters, community engagement and educational opportunities, as well as youth activities and support for the elderly. But above all, it prides itself on providing a safe space where Muslims can cultivate their faith whilst also integrating in our multicultural and multi-ethnic community. So if I can start by inviting Sister Javaria, please.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for having me here today and allowing me to share the space with you today. So I've been asked today to speak about what Muslim organisations are doing to address racial justice. So today I'm going to be speaking about Rumi's Cave and their approach. Rumi's Cave is a community space in North London. Amina Babikar, who is the manager of Rumi's Cave, wanted me to be here today to talk about this space because she was unable to attend. And after speaking with her, I'm going to do my absolute best to transmit her thoughts and also my thoughts as best that I can. So Rumi's Cave focuses on putting the Sunnah into action and being in service of people and those who are most socially isolated. Rumi's Cave provides breakfast for the community. They have a function which is called Rumi's Kitchen, which is a soup kitchen. They provide hospital visits for the elderly. And as well as this, describes the space as an abode for people to come to meet others, to connect with others, to express themselves. Rumi's Cave is a non-judgmental space which is fundamentally not affiliated with any political party. So I spoke at length with Amna about how Rumi's Cave as an organisation aims to talk about anti-Blackness, white supremacy, and how Rumi's Cave talks about the responsibility of Muslims in dealing with these issues within themselves and what their obligation is to others and to society and the community to confront and eradicate these spiritual, personal and societal diseases. So just to give you a bit of an insight, she went on to say that Rumi's Cave doesn't create specific programming, for instance, for Black History Month, just to talk about Black Muslims in that month, or to talk about racism, or to talk about white supremacy. They include it in their general programming all year round. You know, it isn't just in a specific month. She said it's not a one-time discussion, it's a part of life. People will come to Rumi's Cave and they'll be able to participate in discussions which are representative of the issues which exist in everyday life, in daily life, and the issues which people should take responsibility for and think critically about in everyday life. So very much echoing kind of what's been said before about kind of not tokenizing these issues at all. So Amna then went on to talk about the fact that, you know, her father, Sheikh Babikar, who is the head of Rumi's Cave, as a Black Sheikh is usually underpaid, expected to work for free, and has not been given the opportunities or the visibility which other Sheikhs or leaders who have lighter skin, who are Arab, South Asian, or white Muslims are given. She said Black Sheikhs are not valued for their craft, their knowledge, their creativity in the same way as others. She said she herself is very conscious. She's the manager of the cave and she wants to protect her father as much as she can. And she tries her best to kind of guide and protect him and, encourage him to take the opportunities which are fair. She recognizes that this is a reality, and she says that the management team at Rumi's Cave is made up mainly of Black women and South Asian women. So what happens at the cave is very much guided by their own lived realities, as well as the prophetic sunnah and the guidance of her father. So having talked to Amina, I sat and I reflected very much on what is there to think about us as non-Black Muslims, thinking about what they do at Rumi's Cave. What are our responsibilities within that? Are we being tokenistic when we're working in organizations as non-Black Muslims? Are we actually listening to Black Muslims? Are we tokenizing Black History Month? Are we talking about racism in one particular month or all year round? It's incredibly important to think critically all the time, to check our intentions all the time before we do anything. And to think about if you're upholding the prophetic sunnah in dealing fairly and justly with people. It made me think a lot about how many questions that we have to ask ourselves. Are we, as people who are non-Black Muslims, South Asian Muslims, Arab Muslims, white Muslims, are we working to smash the idol of white supremacy in our hearts? Do I and all of us recognize that this is an obligation for me as a Muslim to remove anti-Black attitudes and pernicious racism from my heart? It cannot exist in my heart if I want to be close to Allah, and it cannot exist because I am a Muslim and I work towards justice. How much do we recognize that we need to connect our intentions, our religious and intellectual knowledge with actual practical change? This is not theoretical. This is not just sitting around having a nice discussion about racism. What are you actually doing? How much are we actually lobbying masjids, community organizations who are run by Arabs, South Asians or white converts to change themselves and their organizations? What do these organizations and masjids, what do their practices look like? Are they just run by anti-Black people who are arrogant racists or not? Are we challenging organizations and masjids who tokenize Black people and who are silent on anti-Black racism? It's not good enough to say it's not possible or to say people won't change. It's just not good enough. We can continue to challenge, we can continue to lobby and speak truth to organizations and masjids who won't change, because we'll make them change, and we have to. It is not for Black Muslims to convince us not to be racist. We have to do this work on ourselves spiritually, and we have to do this work with our own ethnic communities, our organizations, and demand change. Anti-Blackness and racism literally ruins people's lives. It is a disgusting, oppressive system which denies people their dignity and their humanity. It is a part of the white supremacist structure. If you are allowing it to happen, you are definitely a part of the issue. If you are a white Muslim, if you are a South Asian Muslim or an Arab Muslim and you are sitting doing nothing to work towards racial justice and to eradicate anti-Blackness, then you will be questioned by Allah, just as I will, just as we all will. It is absurd to think that we can live our middle class, comfortable model minority lives and do nothing, and that we won't be questioned by Allah. We will be, all of us will be. If Rumi's Cave can create an organization which is equitable and fair and works towards racial justice, why can other organizations not do that? So yeah, that's all from me for now.
Jazakallah khairan, Javaria. I could tell that was straight from the heart. And a lot of those questions are those hard-hitting questions that I think we really need to be asking ourselves, that our community really needs to be asking. So we really, really appreciate you coming and sharing that. And we thank you so much for the work that you do at Rumi's Cave, which has for many years been a very safe space for many of us. Jazakallah khairan. If I can now invite Tawfiq Akinpeju, please. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Thanks for inviting me here today. So I'll be speaking about what we do at the Muslim Association of Nigeria, Old Kent Road Mosque. I guess not to tackle specifically the issue of anti-Black racism, but as people in a position of power and a position of privilege, in that we have our own masjid, which is actually named after a community, which I know a lot of people have kind of concerns about that, but as a minority community, what are we doing in order to ensure that it's an inclusive environment for other Black Muslims, so Muslims of maybe Sierra Leonean descent or from the West Indies, etc. And also, what are we doing to make it more inclusive from the perspective of the generation? So those first generation kids born in the UK and being really acting as advocates as in our position as youth leaders for the youth against some of the attitudes that our parents hold. Because as much as it's important that we point out to the outward kind of discrimination we might face, it's also important that we challenge internally some of the attitudes of our own community when it comes to when we then kind of get the position of power and influence. So I guess in our masjid, little things from, I guess, the other masjids can pick up on with regards to, for instance, when it comes to Salah, we don't have reserved spaces, so to speak. Yes, in the month of Ramadan, you always kind of reserve some spaces for the people who are going to recite and the imams, but in some other masjids, you realize that actually you daring to stand in the first saf causes a lot of consternation, right? Or who's this person with no kopi on his head or no hat on his head deciding to stand in the first row? So just little things like that where we consciously make sure that we have a policy where there is no reserving spaces. If the imam turns up late, the imam chills at the back and somebody else takes his spot. Obviously somebody who's qualified, but this is the kind of first come, first serve attitude we have in our masjid. Also from the perspective of, yes, it is the Muslim Association of Nigeria, but we have a variety of imams that lead us on a regular basis. For instance, Fajr is typically led by our dear imam from Afghanistan. He's an old Sheikh who walks, subhanAllah, a distance to always be available at Fajr to lead us. So just little signs like this, even though, yes, it says Muslim Association Nigeria on the door, when you come in, it's an environment where everyone feels at home and at peace. Little things we do as well as a member of the youth and also as the Emir of the youth, we organize a December camp or December retreats where we try and keep the kids away from all of the merriments that are happening around that time. And increasingly in the last couple of years, what we've seen is that the children of the regular mosque users who aren't Nigerian, so some of our Somali brothers, some of our brothers from Syria, some of our North African brothers, are increasingly bringing their kids to our programs. And essentially, yes, when we're running our programs, typically it's in our own language, so there's a bit of a barrier there as to why they don't join our programs. But typically when it comes to the youth, these kids are in school together anyway. This is the next generation who are growing up as Muslims with a common shared UK identity, so to speak. So typically trying to bridge the gap when it comes to them has been something that we're finding is successful. In other areas we do that is with the Maracas, we organize a sports day annually where the kids of the Maracas kind of compete, egg and spoon race, sack race, that kind of stuff, 4x4 relays and all that kind of nice stuff. But typically we'd always invite the parents. And this is an opportunity for parents who normally will never be in each other's circles, an opportunity for them to just have that kind of human relationship with one another and realize that actually we've got kids just like you have. We root for them and want the best for them just like you do. We want them to be safe when they leave the houses and come back home just like you do. So often creating those environments where different members of our community at the Old Kent Road Mosque can relate to one another and get to know one another more personally. These have been things that have been quite successful in bridging the gap. Another thing we run in the community through the youth and through, alhamdulillah, those practitioners in our community from the health sector is that we run typically maybe twice or three times a year, a health clinic in the masjid. And often this is, the more we've run it, we try to publicize it ahead of time so that, yes, our base community of the elderly Nigerian Muslims will always be the ones who will definitely turn up on that Sunday morning to kind of get their blood pressure checked out, to speak to a doctor, to get advice on, let's say they're using different medications and they want to know if it's okay. a lot of them might not feel that they can have these discussions with their own GP. That's a whole different issue around access to healthcare within the Black community. But this is another bridge where increasingly it's not just members of our Nigerian community who decide to attend these health clinics, it's members of the wider community. So going back to our Sheikh, the Afghani Imam, he's always the first one to try to show to the rest of them that actually we're in this space, we're not strangers, we're not just here to kind of use the facilities for Salah and leave. He tries to linger and tries to almost invite other people to take a more active kind of participation in the masjid beyond just coming to pray 5 times a day. So yes, I guess it's a bit of a different topic, given that we in our masjid are pretty much the ones in control. But what I would say is that there is something to say about what we are doing as youth to be advocates for the children, not against their parents, but in the front of their parents. So a lot of the time, our parents who perhaps weren't born in the UK, kind of came here as immigrants, they hold different attitudes to certain issues that we do. For instance, in our community, a big one is the keeping of the beard. To have a long beard is like, what are you doing? Like, what have you become? Whereas increasingly, when we kind of show to our parents that, look, we're in good jobs, where we haven't kind of gone off the rails, and the young ones who want to practice the sunnah as fully as they can, you shouldn't block them from doing that, and it's not a sign that, let's say, they're becoming extreme, etc. So there's that role that we're playing. And also when it comes to stuff like intercultural marriages, etc. Yes, in the past, it might have been much more difficult for, let's say, a brother from our community to say he wants to marry outside of the community. But with those from our community that have done it, and they become advocates for the younger ones, so that increasingly we don't have that kind of tension that might have existed in our parents' generation, even amongst the Black community, because increasingly, like, we all attended the same schools. We have a common shared Black British experience, and on top of that being Muslims, it's important that we really try to move the dial when it comes to the attitudes of our parents, and that's the kind of work that we're trying to do at the Muslim Association of Nigeria. So yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to share some of my thoughts on and experience, and yeah, look forward to any questions you might have. Barakallahu feek.
Jazakallah khairan, brother. That was really, really, there's just so much that our other mosques and Muslim organizations can learn from a lot of what you just said. And I would just love to see some of that replicated in other places, because you'll see from the chat, a lot of people, again, were talking about finding that mosque a safe space and a welcoming and inclusive space, mashallah. So just a reminder to all the attendees, please do continue putting questions in the Q&A box. I am keeping an eye on it, and we will take a break to answer some of those questions shortly. But now I'm going to move on to our last topic, where once again, mashallah, we've got 2 speakers. So I'm really, really pleased to introduce Sultana Parveen, who is a public speaker, anti-racist activist and educator. She's worked extensively within the Muslim community in London, for 20 years, speaking on issues of race, misogyny, and political engagement. She's currently involved in an online platform for Muslim women across the globe, which seeks to find safe and viable spaces where they can discuss and lead conversations and critique social and political issues. And mashallah, Sister Sultana has been a huge support and one of the driving forces behind organising this 2-day conference. Also speaking with her will be Brother Will Noor, who is a researcher in sociology. He looks at how young Muslims in Europe and North America navigate race, class, and gender barriers from a decolonial and restorative perspective. He's an awarded photographer and filmmaker, having directed the documentary Polish Muslims, An Unexpected Meeting. And he's also the author of the book Young Muslim Changemakers. As a research fellow at the University of Warwick, his current project, The Diaspora Strikes Back, explores how Muslims in Europe and America resist white supremacy. And they're talking on a very interesting topic about effective brotherhood and allyship in fighting anti-Black racism in Muslim spaces. So over to you, Sultana.
Assalamu alaikum. Before I begin, I just want to begin on behalf of himself and myself to just make this statement. So I'm just going to hand it over to Will first, and then it will come back to me, if that's okay.
And also, whilst you do that, Sister Sultana, your sound is a little bit low. So if just before, whilst we hand over to Will, if you can just check that. Yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
All right, Brother Will.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, so like for this presentation, I think both me and Sultana, we would like to start with by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, whether it's like here in the UK or like on the other side of the pond, is first of all the land of an empire which has been built by the poor and the vulnerable with stolen resources and achieved through racial divide and genocide across the globe. So we acknowledge that we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we work and live. And we don't represent anyone or any organizations. We only speak on our behalf from our life experiences. So we don't pretend having answers or solutions, as we still have a lot to learn. But we also acknowledge that not being Black, knowingly or not, we are contaminated by this global system of white supremacist capitalism and patriarchy. So any good that comes from this presentation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any mistakes are ours, so hold us to account if so. Over to you, Sultana.
Oh, Sister Sultana.
Yeah, I'm here.
Alhamdulillah.
My video is not on, so I can start. I've started my video. Okay, here we go. Bismillah. Perfect. Okay, I just want to thank everyone today for inviting me on here and allowing me this space. I want to particularly thank Sister Rashida and Hawa who've allowed me to come and speak. I'm speaking specifically from my own experience as a South Asian Muslim who's grown up in the UK. I can only speak really from the community that I come from. I come from the South Asian community, the South Asian diaspora community that's established here in the UK, a community which is by and large one of the most powerful in terms of the Muslim communities that exist here in the UK, because it has one of the largest demographic of Muslims here in the UK. So if we start from that place, we can see that whilst South Asians in this country have worked very hard to establish themselves, they've suffered racism. If anybody knows about, you know, the kind of previously in Cable Street, some of the kind of fighting that went on to fight the racists and the fascists there, it was Bengalis, it was South Asians who allied with Black brothers and sisters to kind of fight the fascists on the streets. But as time has worn on, it feels as though the South Asian community in this country, in an attempt to kind of establish itself, has forgotten their roots. And in fact, what has happened is that we have what Dr. Ware spoke about, which is that we have become consumed with this idea of consumerism to establish ourselves, to become part and parcel of the host society, to kind of get cars and education and all of these kind of things, all the trappings of capitalist lifestyle. Now, some of these things are not wrong. They're not necessarily something which is something that we should deny. And there's nothing wrong with having money. However, the consequence of this has been that for so many Muslims, South Asian Muslims living in this country, they have almost accepted unequivocally the fact that they have co-opted white supremacy, that they are close to white supremacy, they're close to whiteness. And so therefore, if you look at the language, the culture, the ideas that exist within the South Asian Muslim community, you would almost think, if you looked at the UK, that Muslimness was synonymous with biryani and shalwar kameez. And I'm not trying to belittle it, but I think that this is the reality of what has happened. If you go into most spaces, yes, most masjids in this country are run by South Asian or Arabs. However, the language that is used to describe people who are black Muslims is let's be honest here, it's absolutely dire and appalling. We have a situation where there's reference made to people called Kala in Urdu. We have references made, and it's off the tongue. It's almost as though these things are normalized. When we talk about colorism within the community, we know that if you have dark skin, even in South Asian communities, the likelihood that you will find a partner for marriage or that you would even be considered attractive is zero. So these are real life things that happen, and these kind of things mentally affect South Asian communities deeply, deeply. So what did I do in the face of all of this, where we see this? I made some small attempt in my own life to kind of try and tackle this. And let me tell you, I came up against a lot of railing against this, a lot of problems, because South Asian communities do not want to discuss the issue of anti-blackness. They are almost in denial as much as white supremacy is. They deny the fact that this has gone on. They deny the fact that this is something which is pernicious and it is evil, and it's something that is to its core kufr, and they don't want to discuss it. And so, yes, I did come up against a lot of kind of railing against this, but it is not the job of the oppressed to speak about the oppression. It's the job of the oppressors to speak of it. So my job, and I hope for lots of South Asian Muslims, our job is to lift the lid on this anti-blackness that exists within our communities, to not believe that we are the stakeholders and the gatekeepers of Islam and the faith, to understand that what we are doing to the Black Muslim community in this country, in fact, what we are doing to ourselves. We have an impending situation of anti-Muslimness that is taking place in the UK. Who is going to fight that? Who is going to fight that if we are not allies with one another, if we do not understand that the core of this is anti-blackness? Who is going to actively ensure that the safety and security of Muslims is not first predicated on a safety and security for Black people? Because remember, all white supremacy, the core of it is anti-blackness. And we also suffer this. So South Asian communities, South Asian Muslims, if we are not tackling this in the masjids, in our schools, amongst our children, because really the first place it starts is in the home. It starts in the home. If you are amongst your family members not actively tackling anti-blackness, if you are not challenging people when they use the slurs, the racial slurs against Black people or people of dark skin, then there is no point in you talking about Bilal and racism and fighting racism and even George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and having like Zahra said, this is something that we need to tackle in our homes. We need to tackle it when we see it, and we need to make sure that we do not shy away from these conversations. Be absolutely assured that the challenge that we're facing in the future for UK Muslims is one which is going to be very, very serious, very serious. And if South Asian Muslims and other majority Muslims in this country do not face this head on by tackling the very issues that are affecting us from within, we will get nowhere, we will fail. And so it's crucial that we carry on the work to tackle colorism, anti-blackness, and this type of racism more than anything. Let's stop giving lip service to these kind of conversations and talking about, yeah, Bilal was Black, and the deen doesn't see color and all this kind of stuff, because we insult the deen, we insult the Prophet and his message, and we are insulting Allah's deen. So I really I wanted to speak with such passion because I believe that at the core of this, we cannot have any more kind of nice kind of conversations where we placate people. This is a real problem. It exists and we need to root it out, because if we do not, we have problems ahead. So inshallah, I just want to end it there.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Sultana. If you see from the chat, so many people were agreeing with you. These are words and a call to action that so many in our community need to hear. So Jazakallah khairan. Brother Will, did you want to come in now?
Yes, I'm ready.
Alhamdulillah. I'll hand over to you. Oh, Brother Will, are you there? The camera doesn't seem to be on.
No, it doesn't allow me to start it.
Oh, it's not anything to do with permissions, is it? Because I know it worked before.
It says the host has stopped it.
Okay.
Here it goes, yeah.
Alhamdulillah. We got there. Jazakallah khairan.
So, assalamu alaikum again. So a few years ago, I would ask myself the question, how can we, like as a general, we restore justice for our Black brothers and sisters? But this general we, am basically deflecting my responsibility. And I think this very question should be a personal one, an intimate one. And instead, I should ask, what can I do to restore justice for my Black brothers and sisters? Because the greatest illusion of power is making us believe that we have known while I believe that all of us, to some extent, in a shape or another, we all hold a certain form of power, even if it's not much. There is power in our ability to choose to whom we are giving our money, to whom we speak with, from whom do we share Facebook posts, Instagram pictures. We have power in our ability to say yes to some people or no to some other people. So this is power. We may not have political or financial power, but we definitely have power even in these small decisions. So for me, generally, when I see artists who are excellent at their work and do not gain a recognition they deserve, I press like. I reshare the stories. When I pay my zakat, I look for charities who have a flawless record and have done work which I have seen with my own eyes. But the question is, do I know all the Black Muslim artists or organizations here in the UK? Of course not. Because who will talk about them? Who will publicize their work? And this makes me believe that we still live in times of Jahiliyyah where people, especially in our own communities, are burying alive the work of our Black brothers and sisters. So I don't choose to give to some people just because they are Black, they are oppressed, but because they are doing excellent work. It's a matter of justice, not charity. And we need, for this work of justice, need to do this extra work to clear up this pile of rubbish, this pile of mediocrity that has buried this excellent work, which people don't want to talk about because it's made by Black people. As a Muslim, my life is guided by one single question. Am I being a mercy to others around me? Am I being a mercy in everything I say, in everything I do? And even these are not my words. These are the words of a very famous Sufi called Rabia Mali, not Rabia Basri, it's someone else, it's Rabia from Pillars of Islam I'm talking about. The Prophet ﷺ was sent as a rahmah to all of the creation. So if we, as the Muslim, we say that we follow his sunnah, are we being mercy to all of us, to all the people around us or not? So I consider that things like knowledge, visibility, resources, and all the kinds of privileges are a form of amana, something that Allah has given me. So just like money. And because I'm white, so I'm just assessing the situation, I have been given access, knowingly or not, to certain spaces and certain platforms. So I have the power to ask myself, do you guys know someone who with more experience, more knowledge, better qualified than me? If so, I have the power of saying no, take this person instead. If I am given a platform, if I am given knowledge, I can ask myself, with whom can I share it? When I write, I can mention people who do excellent work. When I make videos, I can share the screen with people who do actual proper work. Sometimes people are busy and they can't make it, and that's fine, but we need to ask ourselves deep inside if we genuinely have done the best we could to find people. And I know that I can and I have to do better. We have centuries of injustice to undo. We pay zakat on our money. So why can't we pay a kind of zakat, give a share of our knowledge and visibility? I consider that my work and my knowledge are not halal until they are shared, until they are useful to the people around me. Our entire society is in debt towards our Black brothers and sisters. But who will pay them reparations? Will that be these multi-million-pound Muslim charities who get involved in any kinds of scandals on repeat? Will that be Muslim OBEs, CBEs, MBEs, or Muslim MPs? Do we think that people who are notorious for hoarding as much power as they can will redistribute these resources? So if we are waiting for those in power to repay the debt, it will never happen. Never. But the good news is we can all do a share of this work. If I look at myself, so I am a freelance photographer and videographer, for example. On one hand, I see Black brothers and sisters with huge knowledge, amazing skills, huge qualifications, who are setting up businesses, who are doing art, and are not being recognized, struggling to find people to publicize their work. On the other hand, I see structures, charities, organizations, or even things like the BBC, who will chase unexperienced, unqualified people to represent Islam on panels, on TV shows, just because they have the looks, the right skin color, the right networks. And I am infuriated. So why can't I give to my brothers and sisters what the society denies them? It's the bare minimum I can do. It is the duty of non-Black Muslims to educate and also hold to account their peers. So in my writings, in my videos, I ask them, are you redistributing spaces, resources, your visibility, your platforms? Are you being complicit of colonial and supremacist organizations, charities, and structures? And these questions, they all start with ourselves as well. Acknowledging that me being white, willing or not, I am a product of white supremacy. There is research showing that children at school, as early as preschool, they learn ideas of white supremacy. They believe that they are superior. We have to undo all this. And by being honest and critical about our decisions, we have nothing to lose and everything to win as a community, because as Muslims, taming the ego is part of our deen. This is what we're looking for. And the only form of supremacy we should allow is supremacy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this society has replaced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with wealth, with arrogance, with whiteness. And as Sister Zara said earlier on, when we divest from whiteness, we divest from shirk. So I tell to my white Muslim peers, divest, not tomorrow, divest now. Redistributing time, visibility, and resources are a form of sadaqah. And you know all sadaqah comes from the Arabic wisdom. So we need to choose wisely to whom we give. And ask this question, are our decisions sustaining oppression or injustice, or are they sustaining justice and rahmah, mercy? That's all I have to say. I'll end it here. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Will. I hope you can see the chat, because you've just got so many people agreeing with what you said. You've stimulated a lot of conversation with some of the questions that you posed. And I think that's a really nice segue for us to move into the Q&A. So if you can stay with us, if you and Sultana can put your cameras on, please. And also Sister Javaria and Brother Tawfiq as well. So I'm just going to quickly turn to the questions. We've got a few minutes for that. So I'm just also having a look at the comments. I'm just, that's popping off as well. Everything's going off at the same time. So there's a question that is not directed at anyone in particular, but it says, I'd be interested to ask which cultures do Black Muslims feel more accepted in, and which cultures they feel more alienated, and what are the reasons for this? Perhaps this may provide insights to a way forward. I'm not sure, Brother Tawfiq, would you feel comfortable answering that? Do we still have Brother Tawfiq on the line? I think he's there, but he hasn't unmuted. Does anyone else, any of the panelists want to answer that, or should I come back to that question? I think, do you know what? For now, I'm going to come back to that question. So let's have a look. Okay, so this is a good question. Someone has asked that I have a strong feeling my perception of African as well as Black Muslims is that there's more inclusion of women as equals. Women are more involved and more openly but when South Asians are involved, they tend to exclude women. Prayer spaces and panels become exclusive to men of one color. Does anyone have an answer to that? I did see that Sister Zara had indicated that she was happy to answer that, but also, I guess, Sister Sultana, did you have any thoughts on that? Or Sister Javaria, either of you? Go on, Sister Sultana.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Javaria can also answer this, but I would say that that is actually just facts. I mean, we are really, it's really important that these conversations are honest. And I think one of the things that I found as being in the community that I live in, which is predominantly South Asian, in all the Muslim spaces, it becomes near impossible to have conversations about misogyny and including anti-Blackness. So when you have Muslim spaces such as massages and what have you, you will find that there has been an eternal struggle in spaces which were predominantly non-Black, where women are not afforded same spaces for masjid spaces, they're not allowed to go and pray there, and all of these other kind of things. And the excuses that are sometimes given is, oh, no, our women don't want to go and pray at the masjid, they want to pray at home. The point here is they're never afforded that opportunity in the first place, even though the Prophet ﷺ in some instances said, you know, bring the women out, especially on days of Eid and what have you. So I think that sometimes when you look at these issues, they're intertwined. You will find, I have found myself, and this is my personal experience, whenever I've gone to places such as Rumi's Cave, I've been to the Nigerian Masjid in Old Kent Road once. I have never had issues. I'm not saying that there aren't issues. I've never had issues with feeling safe, with feeling included, with feeling my voice being heard. And that is, I'm not just one person saying that. I speak to South Asian women all the time, and they have similar struggles with regards to, you know, those kind of things. Now, imagine those spaces for Black Muslim sisters or Black brothers. So we know that these things are real. They go on all the time. And it may not be that the mosque committee are necessarily, you know, kind of actively doing anything, but they're certainly not trying to tackle anti-Blackness. And I think this is what the major issue is. They're not actively tackling anti-Blackness. And so therefore, it is important in this respect, even now, to call these institutions out. I'm sorry, there's no time to kind of try and have nice conversations with them. If you're not willing to tackle these things which are fundamentally jahil, you need to be called out. You need to be accounted. You need to be held to account. The days where we can just try and placate issues and speak nicely are gone. I was recently on a platform in my area where, you know, it was kind of a masjids coming together under an umbrella organization. I had to leave because, again, those spaces are not just made for Muslim women, forget brown women or Black women. So this is a real issue. Yes, I absolutely agree that you will find that places which are non-Black Muslim spaces, which are there definitely is a greater challenge in terms of visibility in those spaces.
Jazakallah khairan. And we have, I think we've got time just for like one more question. If I can just put that to Brother Will, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the question was, someone mentioned that, as has been said previously, the problem is not ours, but that of our non-Black brothers and sisters. So the question is, how do we get them, and that's the non-Black Muslims, to come to the realization that humanity is one and justice should be the basis of our interaction?
Sorry, is the question written somewhere? I'm just browsing the Q&A thing.
Yeah, sorry, it's the second to last question from Marufdin Oyekan, and I'll see if
okay, I see it.
Okay, brilliant. You've seen it already.
I think I would put this from a different perspective, in the sense that what I've observed among people who generally hold any kind of privileges is that there's no sensitivity, there is no awareness that some people are being oppressed. I've seen it with men when it comes to the oppression of women. I've seen it with non-Black Muslims when it comes to oppression of Black Muslims. I've seen it with rich Muslims when it comes to the oppression of the poor. It's like whenever people hold a little bit of privilege, they are blind to the oppression of others. They cannot fathom that some other people suffer. And this is why we hear things like, oh, you know, they're just like acting, they're just attention seeking, and basically this kind of comments dismissing the pain and the suffering of people. And I think this is the very first and most important work to do, to acknowledge that there is suffering, and people suffer because there's this such and such, and just trying to break the bubbles. But at the same time, how do you break the bubble? And I don't have an answer for this, because it's, I mean, I'm going to quote Amina Babikir, with whom I had this conversation once, and she said that some people, they have to crash and burn and feel themselves some kind of suffering to realize in their life, and to realize that, yeah, it can happen to some other people. So it's a very difficult question. How can we achieve this degree of awareness? But if someone really wants to, yeah, it can start with reading, with talking to others, and just like a huge work of humility, that everything we know, because we haven't experienced it, it's not necessarily true. And there is truth in what other people say as well. I think that's the best I can summarize it.
Jazakallah khairan. And I think that was a really good way to sort of explain and answer that question. So I'm going to just once again say a really big thank you to Javeria, Tawfiq, Sultana and Will for your excellent contributions. In the interest of time, we're not able to answer all of the questions. And that first question that I mentioned about which cultures do Black Muslims feel more accepted in, which cultures they feel alienated. I think, speaking as a Black Muslim, really, what we're talking about today is about being excluded from certain cultures. So understanding that Black Muslims, we're not a monolith, we're all very different. So rather than it being about what cultures do we feel accepted in, it's about spaces actively excluding us or making us feel unwelcome. So I hope that assists. So now I'm really excited. Just before we move on to the second part of this conference, I am so excited to introduce Sister Neymar B. Roberts. Over the past 20 years, she has been telling stories and empowering other women tell their own. She's a trailblazing author, and her best-selling memoir, which some of you will be very familiar with, is known as From My Sister's Lips. And true story, actually led one of my aunties to accept Islam at about the age of 80 years old. Sister Neymar regularly appears on TV and across media outlets, and has appeared on many of the TV channels that you would have heard of. And what's super exciting is that she is going to be telling us a little bit more about the groundbreaking Black Muslim Festival, or also the Black Muslim Family Festival, which she launched earlier this month and has been taking place throughout this month. And for many Black Muslims that I've spoken to, it's been a really emotional experience for us seeing that and being part of it. So without much further ado, I will invite Sister Neymar, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You can see me. I'm seeing the lovely screen saver, so I'm not sure whether you guys can see me yet.
We can see you. I'm just trying to see if we can get you on full screen.
Bismillah. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. The first thing I'd like to say is just a huge jazakumullahu khairan for the MCB, for the Proudly Muslim and Black group inviting me. I feel very much like a student in this space, so I appreciate the honor of being able to address you and tell you guys a little bit about the Black Muslim Festival. And really, the Black Muslim Festival was something that was born out of the need or the desire to celebrate Black Muslim identity. Black Muslim identity, Black Muslim experience, the Black Muslim legacy, and ideating a Black Muslim future. And I think one of the things that has allowed us to do this and to receive the support that we have received, not just from the global Black Muslim family community, but also from the Muslim community and specifically certain Muslim organizations. I'd like to thank the MCB for, wholeheartedly coming behind the festival. And I believe that initiatives like this, the work that you've been doing, the symposiums, and even this particular project, and the conversations that have been taking place in the community since the summer, certainly, and prior to that, is what allowed people to, when they heard of a Black Muslim festival, to immediately understand that this was needed, that this is necessary, that this is something beneficial, that this is something powerful. And I think if we had tried to do the Black Muslim festival like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I think we would have seen a very, very different response. And certainly if we had done it before the summer, we would have had a lot of pushback and a lot of backlash, which alhamdulillah, I'm happy to say we have not had. So, I mean, we're on the final weekend now. So I'd like to share with, all of you a little bit about what I have learned being the moderator of over 30 conversations as part of this festival. And the first thing that I want to say is the necessity of recognizing and strengthening the global Black Muslim identity. SubhanAllah, there is so much power in Black people from different parts of the world coming together. And this is what we've had. We've been blessed to have speakers from, literally from the UK, Canada, the States, all over Africa and elsewhere, coming onto panels together for the first time, meeting each other for the first time, getting the opportunity to learn from each other, different approaches, different experiences, the things that we have in common, the things that are different. And that has really, I have seen a growth in almost a Pan-African Islamic identity, which, no matter what anybody else says, I believe, and many of us on the panel believe, that the future for Africa is Pan-African, and that the way for Africa to heal is for Africans, us as Africans, to recognize our common identity and our common fate, and not allow the current divisions, whether they're national, whether they're tribal, whatever they are, to divide us and allow others to come in and exploit us and exploit our resources. And the same can be said for Black Muslims abroad, for Black Muslims around the world. And subhanAllah, having the opportunity to actually listen to each other in that space has allowed almost a healing to take place. And why I'm saying healing is because in these conversations, and these are conversations that have ranged from Sheikh Abdullah Hakim talking about Black history and the African presence in Islam, from the year of the Prophet ﷺ's birth, all the way to relationships, to Black Muslim women's safe spaces, to money conversations, to to dealing with oppression and systemic racism, etc. Across almost every single conversation, there's two things that come up again and again, and one is trauma. And being in a space where your collective trauma is recognized and acknowledged is the first step towards healing. And whether you are coming from, the Western, from the diaspora, and the trauma that you have inherited was slavery, or you are from the continent and the trauma that you have inherited is colonialism and the oppression and the stealing of resources, etc. You will find that when we come together as Black Muslims, there's one thing that comes through again and again, and that is this theme of trauma and this needing to heal and this power of the collective healing process. So that's the first thing that I feel is a very, very important part of us as Black Muslims taking back our power. And I'm very big on this. Somebody asked, how we can show other Muslims that we are human and that we are all part of one humanity. And to be honest, my approach to that is very, very stark. And it is this: the people who, the victims of oppression, our job is to center ourselves and center our narrative. Because when victims of oppression on any level center the opinions of the oppressors, whoever they are, and there are many of them, okay? It could be in one situation, it could be men, it could be leaders, it could be patriarchs, it could be whoever, right? But when the victims of oppression start to center the opinions of the oppressor, whether they are knowing or not knowing, what happens is we start to perform for their gaze, and we start to justify, and we want to try to humanize ourselves and prove something to people who do not deserve to be given that space in your sight. And what it does, it takes our energy and it puts it towards showing somebody something, teaching something to somebody. And this is my personal opinion, having moderated several discussions. There are two opinions within the speakers that we've had and the audiences. And the one is we need to be involved in the system in order to change it from within. And the other is that we need to pull back and focus our resources internally and start building for ourselves. So for me, it's a very, very interesting time to be who we are, because we are in a space where we have the power to do for ourselves. We have the power to come together, to help each other, to create our own narrative. And I hope we continue to do that with things like the Black Muslim Festival and more content, films, documentaries, books, collaborations. We need to see those. But the other thing is as well, working with organizations like MCB and others who recognize the need for this within their organizations structurally. There are people in our community who are doing that right now. So it's like there's a two-pronged approach. And so I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. And for those of you who have supported the Black Muslim Festival, including MCB, I just want to say Jazakumullahu khairan, and let's make this a continuation. This shouldn't be a Black History Month conversation. This should be an ongoing conversation as part of us becoming the best ummah, becoming the example to the rest of mankind. This was the challenge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala issued to us when we were given this haqq. You are the best of mankind. This is part of our way of earning that title, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah khairan, sister. That was really, really powerful. And exactly, anyone who's missed it, please do make sure you do catch up on the sessions that have been going on as part of the Black Muslim Festival, and we will share the details. So Jazakallah khairan, Sister Neymar, for joining us and for sharing that. I am now pleased to move on to the second part of the conference. And I am conscious of time, that we're quite short on time, so I hope you will all be patient with us. I know that there were some questions posted in the Q&A talking about what MCB is doing in this area, and about MCB as an organization in terms of how they're tackling this with their affiliate organizations, etc. So it's a perfect time for me to invite Harun Khan, who is the Secretary General of MCB, who's going to tell us more about the Black and Muslim report that we've been working on, and also more about the work that MCB are doing in this area. Brother Harun.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, As-salatu wassalamu ala Rasul Kareem. Jazakallah khair, Sister Hawa, for your excellent hosting this evening. I've been listening quite intently actually since the beginning of the session. And my part was really to introduce the next bit about the report. But before that, it would be remiss of me if I didn't talk about what I've heard so far from, all of the excellent speakers. Just very heart-rending, really emotional. There's been so many views shared and opinions, and very difficult to disagree with. I was listening and thinking at the same time about my own experiences through life, and my engagement through different masajid as well. Very powerful right from the beginning for Brother Mustafa, Briggs, Sister Zahra from a local perspective, and Dr. Bilal Ware, very on point, as an academic, very powerful messages that he gave. And then followed by Imam Abdulrahman, as well as the more recent speakers. I can't name everyone, I'm going to run out of time. But I would urge those who missed it to actually listen again because the video is live on Facebook as well. From the Muslim Council of Britain, being the largest representative body, for those who don't know, you know, we've been trying very hard to bring about this awareness and change. And this forum, this program today and tomorrow, is just one method that we've been using to try and address this. I've seen some questions around specifics around, you know, affiliates and numbers and so on. I can give, you know, I can name people and numbers of people who are involved in MCB, but I don't think that's going to actually provide a solution for us. The solution will really come is in terms of what follows as an action from these sessions. And I hope that Sister Rashida will cover some of this when she talks about the racial justice workshops that are coming up about creating greater awareness of the inequalities that exist within Muslim communities and the anti-blackness that exists. Is very apparent and very obvious for different reasons. I think sometimes we fail to acknowledge this, maybe not through our own experiences, until we hear it from someone. You don't feel that, you know, we're not in their shoes, and just listening today to some of that it's quite disturbing, really. And I've heard it over the last couple of years. So I've been in my role coming up to 4 years, and I think what Brother Will said is really important. That actually, when you're in a position of power, you know, you can do something. And I am in a position of power and authority at being at the head of MCB as an organization. As the MCB is supposed to represent as best as possible. It's a voluntary organization, but it's supposed to represent the makeup of Muslims within the UK as best as possible. So we're made up of member organizations, mosques, Islamic organizations, charities, and institutions. And our role is to lead by example as best as possible. So we can do the best we can with the means that we have to address that, and using all means that we can. So in some ways, these kind of sessions around addressing the points, bringing the speakers, giving the platform for them to say and speak and share those experiences, but also through practical action. So I think some of the things that Sister Zahra mentioned around taking certain steps around diversity, not diversity, and I think that was a very good point. It's not just about diversity, it's about anti-blackness. And for my part, as best as I could do, I felt that to bring about some of that change, recognizing this unfairness, is to actually appoint people into positions of authority within the MCB to bring about that change. And I'm really pleased to say that, you know, my immense heartfelt thanks go to Sister Rashida, who is one of the key people behind the Proudly Muslim and Black initiative. We organized a big conference in SOAS University for a whole day to look at Black Muslim history, all Black speakers, a range of people talking about a range of topics that people don't really hear about much. And we've constantly been building on that. So this isn't just a one-off event in Black History Month. There's actually been a lot of work happening over the last 2 years in building those relationships, in creating awareness, in running workshops. Maybe a lot of people didn't get to hear about it, but inshallah, I think over time it will grow. And we need your support to spread those messages, to create that awareness through sharing on social media, and also giving us feedback and giving us advice as well, as you have been doing through these sessions. So I just wanted to express my thanks initially for today, for the first round of speakers who have attended and shared their views, and internationally as well, for the brothers who joined us from abroad, from Nigeria and Senegal. It's quite amazing, really. In terms of the coming to the end of the session, the purpose of my introduction was really to talk about the Proudly Muslim and Black report and the immense amount of work that's gone into it. So I've had a review of it, and it covers so many different topics, which we can't cover here today. You will see, obviously, when the report comes out, focusing on arts and heritage, Black Lives Matters, criminal justice, education, employment, health and well-being, media, politics, religion and sport. And there's been a lot of engagement from the community, lots of contribution from many different experts on those subject topics from the Black Muslim community, sharing their views and their expertise that will be highlighted from the different contributions across all sectors and from the Afro-Caribbean background. So I really wanted to express my appreciation to all of the contributors for their time and effort in putting it all together. And aside from that, huge number of volunteers who have supported the report compilation process, the organization of the conference that took place before, and the development of the racial justice workshops that are coming up. And inshallah, Sister Rashida will mention this at the end of the session as well, inshallah. So once again, I just want to show my appreciation and thanks to everyone who's helped to bring all of this together. And I hope that going forward, inshallah, that the MCB plays a key role in ensuring that spreading that message of how anti-blackness is wrong within our Muslim communities, and that for the future that we can hope for a much better future with a more inclusive community towards all of our Muslim brothers and sisters. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Harun, and thank you so much for that introduction into the report, and also just that insight into some of the things that we're doing at MCB on this topic. So we are running about 15 minutes behind, so inshallah, we hope you'll just bear with us and be patient with us. But I'm going to invite Brother Muntasir and also Sister Rashida, who you've heard so much about, the Assistant General Secretary of the MCB, and who's been the lead on the Black and Proudly Black and Muslim initiative. Brother Muntasir and Sister Rashida, if I can hand over to both of you now. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sister Rashida, why don't you go ahead?
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, let me just first thank everyone for attending this conference and for your contributions. The discussions have been very, very awesome. And like I said, like everybody have been saying, this is not just a one-off thing. It is something that's been going on for over 2 years now. We started since 2018. And since I joined the MCB as an Assistant Secretary General, it's been a lot of support from a lot of, from the exec to staff members to, everybody. It's been a lot of support to make sure that we actually address these issues that are very, very important for the community. We've heard it from all the speakers, so I don't really have to repeat anything. So I'll just go straight to ask Brother Muntasir to talk about the Proudly Muslim and Black reports, which is one of the things that we've been working on for the past few months to put together. And there is a reason for that, because we do, recognize the fact that there is a lot of these issues. We talk about them. It's not as if everybody knows about them, but we want to have them in tangible form, in forms that can be referred to, that can be referenced, that people can actually research into, and use as reference points to make important decisions. So Brother Muntasir has been working with a whole lot of us, more than 35 contributors actually, from across, a sector. And so he would give a brief, and then we'll have about 2 of the contributors talk about what their experiences have been like working on the report. Brother Muntasir. Please unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you again. I'll just take a moment and explain a little bit about the report. I think more time should be spent on 2 of the contributors who are about to talk about their research. Very in brief, in a nutshell, I am awfully excited about what we're doing. As Sister Rashida talked about, and as Brother Harun also mentioned, these are one way to create change is to publish and is to create references. And what's interesting to me is that not a lot of research has been done or published or publicly available. And so what more important way to bring people together, what a better way to create collaboration and networks than to bring the lived experiences and to also bring to light some of the ways in which inequality, anti-Blackness, and unequal power relations are felt and experienced, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in our congregations and community institutions. So that's why it just makes me smile, and it makes me terribly excited at what we're doing, which is to invite a range of Black British Muslims from across the UK to document, record, and work together to publish some of these ideas, to create a document that I hope, inshallah, will become will be a sort of a breakthrough in terms of what we understand and what we know about Black British Muslims in Britain. And having said that, I'd like to pass on the mic to two of our contributors, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Muntasir. So yeah, it's been a really brilliant project. And if I can introduce some of our contributors to talk about some of the contributions they've made, as Brother Muntasir said, there've been a number of us, including myself, who have used our practical, professional, community experience to really talk about some of the pertinent issues affecting the Black Muslim community in order to contribute to this report. So myself, when I'm not presenting conferences like this, I'm a criminal barrister, and I was leading the working group on criminal justice, and we looked in this report at the experience of Black Muslims right from pre-charge, their interactions with the police, to from charge to conviction, how their interactions are when going to court as defendants and as victims and witnesses, and then also in custody and in the probation system. I'm gonna pass on to Sister Bilakis, who was also part of the criminal justice working group. MashaAllah, she's someone who has a lot of experience working in immigration and is one of very few Black female magistrates, so a Black judge essentially. And she wrote on the impact of immigration on Black Muslims in the criminal justice system. So Sister Bilakis Savage, if I can invite you to just talk a little bit about your contribution, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think the host might need to unmute my camera, but I'll continue to speak. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and a labor of love to be part of this journey, because I remember when we started, like when we had the conference, and after the conference we had various meetings, and it was commissioned for us to do a report. And my areas of community expert is around what I know from the community. So I focus on immigration policy changes and effect on Black Muslims. And how did this come about? Some people that have been in the UK going back to 2010 would know that immigration is a hot cake. Since the expansion of European Union onto the point of Brexit, immigration has been a big topic and a very sensitive topic as well. But the issue is, how does that affect us? And why do we need to talk about it? Why we need to talk about it is because the new Immigration Act that was enacted in 2014 had a big impact on everyone, particularly Black people. But there's no qualitative data to validate the impact on Muslims. And that's been the essence of why it's been a labor of love to do these parts of the report. Essentially, when the new act was enacted in 2014, and some people will know, there was the fact that people cannot literally apply for bank account, rent property, hold driving license if you don't have status. And suddenly, people who have lived in this country for over 20 years were suddenly being detained, jailed, particularly for children who are brought to this country, who have lived in this country for years, because we're not able to prove their status. If they had a minor criminal record, they were being detained and jailed. So that's one area of the report that we had to look into. The other issue is, as people will know, in the last 20 years, the population of Muslims have grown. Our population have grown in the UK. But the problem we have faced is we're disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. And the impact of the immigration policy has also had an effect. So again, going back to what's happened since the new law. In 2018, a lot of people will have heard about the Windrush Review. Basically, the Windrush Review came about because a lot of people who came to the UK in the 50s and 60s, mostly Black Caribbeans, were being detained suddenly and being asked to prove their status. And what then happened also is, if some of them have had minor criminal record, they were being detained, jailed, and sentenced. And the scandal broke in 2018, and the then Home Office Secretary ordered Wendy Williams to commission the report. Where we are now is the fact that the report has been commissioned, but the new Immigration Act is still on statute. It hasn't changed. So what we looked into is how the policy is affecting us, because as far back as last month, there was a report in the Guardian to say about 200,000 children, either born or they were brought up in this country, were living in this country with that status. So what we've done through this report is to highlight the impact of the new law, and it is hoped that this will give MCB the opportunity to lead and take forward some of the recommendation, because we need to start addressing solution and to make sure that people are aware where we are today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Bilikisu. So little has been written and researched on that topic, so it's really exciting to have you doing that work. I'd now like to invite Sister Armani Mugasa, who has again written on a really brilliant topic, the Black Muslim women's antenatal experiences in the UK. Sister Armani.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, mashallah, we can hear you loud and clear. I'll just switch off my video so you can be front and center.
So yeah, my name's Amani Magassa and I'm a junior doctor based in Scotland. I was really excited to be involved in this project, which was led by and was for Black Muslims like myself. The Black Muslim report really complemented my interest in public health and tackling health inequalities, and I chose the topic of Black Muslim women's antenatal care experiences in the UK. So my report includes 6 personal accounts of Black Muslim women from various backgrounds and locations in the UK. And these accounts really demonstrate something that we call in public health as intersectionality. So this is the idea that different aspects of someone's identity, in this case being Black and Muslim, overlap to create this unique experience of discrimination that, say, a non-Black Muslim or a non-Muslim Black person would not experience. So I was inspired to do this report because of the Embrace UK maternity mortality report from 2017, which highlighted really shocking statistics where it said that Black women's maternal deaths were 5 times higher than white women's in the UK. And there's very little research to date actually explaining this discrepancy. And then when we go on to look for research about Black Muslim women, then there's nothing at all. So one of the most interesting conversations I had was with a Black Muslim midwife who said, actually, in her opinion, from what she observed throughout her career, was she felt that discrimination alone was enough to explain these statistics. And she described things that she observed which really were reflected in all of the women's stories, things like women having their symptoms dismissed, having delays in treatment or investigations, or even having treatment and investigations withheld. Then the idea of over-medicalizing women's antenatal journey, which creates, higher risk situations. And then the lack of autonomy that Black Muslim women have with their care as well was quite a common theme. So yeah, I mean, I want to really thank Muslim Council Britain for taking this first step in documenting the Black Muslim experience. And I hope, like its other reports, like I think there's one on Islamophobia, which I noticed came up on some of the research papers I was reading as a reference. So I hope that this will also be a reference for further research in the future. And really, no woman should experience what these women have experienced. And if it is truly a reflection of the wider Black Muslim experience, then it's quite concerning. And I said at the end of my report that this kind of discrimination is at best traumatizing, and at its worst can be life-threatening. So I think, well, I hope that everyone reads the report, and I hope this leads to formal research on these topics to try and make an impact with this. Jazakallah, that's
Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah khairan, Sister Armani. That was absolutely brilliant. And for yourself as a junior doctor, Sister Bilqis, as someone who works in immigration and is also a magistrate, to take the time to do this and really write about these things that we care about is so needed in our community. So alhamdulillah, thank you all so much for participating and for joining us and for staying engaged during this time. I'm going to pass over to Sister Rashida, the Assistant General Secretary of MCB, to just wrap up with some last final remarks, but just want to say from me and on behalf of others, once again, huge thank you to the speakers, but also huge thank you to all of you for joining us today. Sister Rashida.
Thank you very much, Awa, for that anchoring of the session, which has been really, really great. And I just quickly want to say one thing, which is that we are still having this same session tomorrow, but tomorrow we are specifically targeting younger people. And if you are with us today, kindly encourage your young ones, any age from 16 downward to 24. Please encourage them to join us tomorrow, because we will be discussing, these same issues, but, in different ways and with more voices for the young people. So we have a number of young people who would be sharing their experiences, with us. And that also will lead me to talk about the anti-Blackness. I could see that in the comments that there is a lot of questions around what is MCB doing about addressing anti-Blackness within the Muslim community, and doing something with the affiliate. And that would make me, signpost all of you to something that the MCB has been working in collaboration with a lot of other Black Muslim organizations, stakeholders, particularly the Black Muslim Forum, Everyday Muslim, the Civil Service Muslim Network, and a lot of other organizations like that have come together with the MCB. And by next month, November, we would start with the Racial Justice Workshop. And these are workshops that would be delivered to actually tackle enlightening and engaging our community about the issue of anti-Blackness, and working towards, gradually eradicating these things within our community. And aside from that, I want to say that you've only had from it, one or two people that have contributed towards the report. We have almost 40, over 35, close to 40 contributions. And there are contributions from a number of important stakeholders, people who are actually working at the grassroots. And this information, these messages are very important for us to, put together and have it out there, give it to the stakeholders, the people that need to hear and that need to make these changes. And that is what MCB is leading on. And it is important to note that we started this since 2018. So it's not just because George Floyd, happened. It's not just because Black Lives Matter, is trending. It's because we truly recognize that these are issues that needed to be, addressed, and MCB is open to engaging and collaborating with the community, and we're doing that. And for the contribution, we have a lot, of information there that will be useful. So tomorrow, please join us at 6 p.m. For whoever is going to be presenting, 5:30, please join us. And we want to hear from the young ones. We want to rub minds with them, and we want to, take these conversations further and not just talking, but actually acting. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see as many of you as possible tomorrow. And please, as I said, bring your young ones along with you. Let them join. It's at home. You're going to be at home. Be on your different devices to join in this conversation. Thank you. And Sister Hawa, did you run away?
Alhamdulillah.
All right. So bye. I'll let you wrap it up.
All right, Jazakallah khairan. So yeah, that's definitely a reminder, everyone, please, tomorrow join us again. And it is about the youth. We have these events, we have these conversations as adults, but actually what about the next generation, and how many of us wish that we could attend events and hear about things like this when we were younger? Let's not rob them of that opportunity. Tomorrow is one of the few events literally targeted at talking about the youth and also enabling the youth to talk. And we have some speakers as young as 10 and 11 years old joining us, so please come and support them. Do follow all of our speakers on social media. You will see on social media information. You can find information about the Black Muslim Family Festival for Sister Neymar Roberts, the work that Dr. Bilal Ware is doing, and the work that all of our speakers were talking about. Please do follow them on social media, and please do support. As everyone has said, today can't just be a session where we came, we listened, we thought about things, and then we went back. This has to be about action. And so all of us, if we can reflect on what we can do differently, join us tomorrow, and then join us next month again for these workshops. Jazakallah khairan, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.